Hi, and welcome back. This is part 4 of Learning React.
Welcome back, so let's inspect the starter code in this part of the tutorial. If you are going to work on the tutorial in your browser, open the code in this new starter tab here, which I already have open here, which is just this stuff. You've seen it before already if you've been following along. We have quite a bit going on here now. This is actually going to draw the board at the bottom. If you're going to work on the tutorial locally, instead open the source/index.js in your project folder. You have already touched this file during the setup. And I don't know if they meant that, like, you can actually do this. Let me actually open a terminal here, which you can do this from terminal, new terminal here in VS Code. You can actually touch a new file and just make it from here. Well, maybe not in this terminal. You could do it in other terminals, but not VS Code. Never mind, so I guess that's not what they're talking about. Anywho, where are we at? So the starter code, the starter code is based on what we're building. We've provided the CSS styling so that you only need to focus on learning React and programming the tic-tac-toe game, which kind of is weird because the tic-tac-toe game only looks like this. It's not stylized the way I would have thought it would have looked. So by inspecting the code, you'll notice that we have 3 React components. So let's actually go back to here, and we're going to open up index.js here, and we're going to have 3 components here. Let's find them all and look for them. We have a square, which extends the component. We have a board, which extends a component. And we have a game, which extends a component. Each of these, like I've stated in the last video, can be neatly wrapped up in a wrapper and thought of their own little thing. They're components. They can fit together like components do. The square component renders a single button, and the board renders 9 squares. The game component renders a board with placeholder values, which we'll modify later. There are currently no interactive components. So let's actually look through that. So square renders a single button. As you can see, the render method is called and just returns a button with a class, we're going to say class name, equal to square, which you will find in the CSS over here, but you should know how this works if you have familiarity with some web design. And we're going to have a to-do in that later, it seems. So board renders this right here, also just renders the square itself. It's going to just do that, yeah. So we actually have a method here too, but I don't know if that's defined. So the board's going to render a square, it's going to return a square. So render square. Okay, so the board gets called here. I misunderstood this. So it has a method defined inside of the board, and which the render method is then called, and we define this variable status that we're going to say next player, x, and then it returns a div, and the div has nested divs, children inside, of status, and then board row, and then it's just going to say this.render square, and then it's got a number for each one. This seems like a crazy way to do it, but that's how they chose to do it. You could have probably used a for loop to simplify that, but I'm not the one making the tutorial. So passing data through the props. To get our feet wet, let's try passing data from our board component to our square component. We strongly recommend typing this code by hand as you're working through the tutorial and not using copy-paste. This will help develop muscle memory and a stronger understanding. In the board's render square method, change the code to pass a prop called value to the square. See, right here, this is a value. And this can be anything. This doesn't have to be defined. You make this up, as well as this right here. So in this case, this I right here, that's what we're going to that's the to-do part of this, I think. Nope, that was in square. My mistake. But this render square has an I. It takes in an I as an argument, and we're going to pass that I through into the return statement to the square with a value of 1. So our square right here, this is our square, our board right here in the square, we're going to say value equals, and then we got to put this in curly brackets, and we're going to take that I that we passed in, because this is going to get fetched right through it here. Just save that. And then we're going to change the square's render method to show that value by replacing to do with this.props.value. And this is what I hinted at we're going to be doing pretty soon. So as you can see right here, class square extends react.component and render return button class name square, and inside of the button we're going to put the value there. So that would essentially make the button clickable. I mean, not necessarily, but it's a step toward it. So we're going to say this.props.value. So any prop could be passed in, but in this particular case it's going to look for the prop value. So before and after, you should see a number in each square in the rendered output. And that's just basically what's happening here, is that it's because we have defined this here in this board, which is calling everything, the render square function. It's going to just say this.render square, and it's going to give it a number for each one, and it's going to annotate and iterate through each, not iterate, but it's going to list each one. Okay, catch you guys in the next video.